The Hartley building had stood on the corner of 5th and Monroe for 83 years, watching the city grow and change around it like a silent witness to time. 10 stories of brick and limestone, with tall windows that caught the morning sun and turned gold at dusk. Once it had been prestigious, home to law firms, insurance companies, architectural offices, where ambitious young people climbed toward their futures. Now, in the autumn of its life, it housed smaller tenants, accountants, therapy practices, a copy center on the 2nd floor that never seemed busy. By day, the building hummed with muted activity. By night, it belonged to Marjorie Bell. She arrived every evening at 9:30, pulling her 15-year-old Honda Civic into the same spot in the underground garage, parking beneath the flickering fluorescent light that had been broken for 6 months. The building manager kept saying he'd fix it, but Marjorie didn't mind. She'd learned to navigate by memory and the faint glow of the exit signs. Marjorie was 58, though she looked older on hard days and younger on good ones. She wore her gray hair in a practical bun, kept her uniform clean and pressed, and moved through the building with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been doing this work for more than a decade. Before the Hartley building, there had been other buildings. Before those, there had been a different life entirely. One with a house in the suburbs, a garden, and a husband who sang off-key in the shower every morning. But that was before. This was now. She clocked in at the security desk, nodding to Marcus, the night guard who worked the lobby, until 2 a.m. He was young, maybe 25, always watching videos on his phone between rounds. He'd nod back, sometimes offer a "have a good night, Mrs. Bell," but mostly they existed in comfortable parallel silence. Her routine never varied. Start on the 1st floor. Empty the trash bins. Wipe down the reception desks. Vacuum the carpets in the waiting areas. 2nd floor. Clean the bathrooms. Mop the hallways. Dust the artificial plants that no one ever noticed. 3rd through 7th. Repeat, repeat, repeat. The work was meditative in its repetition. Her mind could wander while her hands stayed busy. Sometimes she thought about her daughter, Claire, who lived in Portland now with her own family. They talked on Sundays, brief calls, where Claire updated her on the grandkids and Marjorie assured her everything was fine. Claire had wanted her to move out west after Frank died, to be closer, to have family nearby. But Marjorie had declined. The house held too many memories to leave, and besides, she liked her routine. It was manageable, predictable, safe. Tonight felt no different than any other Tuesday. October had settled over the city with its particular blend of chill and decay, the smell of dead leaves and approaching rain. Marjorie moved through the lower floors with practiced rhythm, her cart squeaking softly as she pushed it from office to office. The building made its familiar sounds around her, the hum of the HVAC system, the occasional creak of old pipes, the distant rumble of the elevator shaft, even though no one else was here. By 11:30, she'd reached the 5th floor. By midnight, she was starting on the 6th. It was on the 7th floor, just past 1 in the morning, that she first heard it. A whisper, so faint she almost convinced herself it was the building settling, or air moving through the ventilation ducts. She paused in the hallway, her mop dripping water onto the tile floor, and listened. Silence. The 7th floor was particularly quiet tonight. Most of the offices here were vacant, waiting for new tenants that never seemed to materialize. The hallway stretched before her in both directions, lit by every third overhead light to save electricity. Shadows pooled in doorways. The windows at the far end reflected her dim silhouette. Marjorie returned to mopping, pushing the water across the floor in long, smooth strokes. She'd developed a rhythm over the years. Push, pull, ring, push. The work kept her arms strong, kept her mind occupied. Sometimes she hummed while she worked, old songs from the radio, tunes Frank used to. Marjorie. She stopped. The mop handle felt suddenly cold in her hands. That had been clearer. Definitely a voice. Soft, barely louder than breath, but unmistakably a voice saying her name. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing down the empty corridor. "Marcus? Is that you?" No response. But Marcus wouldn't be up here anyway. He stayed in the lobby unless there was an emergency. And there hadn't been an emergency in the 3 years she'd worked this building. Marjorie set the mop back in the bucket and walked slowly down the hallway, her rubber-soled shoes silent on the damp floor. She checked each office as she passed. Dark windows, locked doors, empty rooms visible through the glass panels. Nothing moved. Nothing was out of place. At the end of the hall, she found herself standing before the stairwell door. It was closed, as it always was. Beyond it, 2 more floors stretched above her. The 8th and 9th held a few scattered offices, while the 10th was mostly storage and mechanical rooms. She rarely went up there. Not much to clean. The whisper didn't come again. After a long moment, Marjorie turned back to her cart, shaking her head at her own foolishness. She was tired. That was all. It had been a long day. Grocery shopping before her shift. A call with Claire that had left her feeling more alone than usual. The anniversary of Frank's death approaching in 2 weeks. She finished the 7th floor and decided to skip the upper levels tonight. Her cart was getting low on supplies anyway, and she had paperwork to finish before her shift ended at 6 a.m. But as she wheeled the cart toward the elevator, she glanced back once more at the empty hallway, at the shadows that seemed deeper than they should be, and felt the smallest flutter of unease in her chest. Wednesday and Thursday passed without incident. Marjorie completed her rounds, clocked out on time, drove home to her small house on Maple Street, where she'd lived for 32 years. She slept during the day with blackout curtains drawn, ate simple meals, tended her garden when the weather allowed. The whisper faded from her mind, filed away as a moment of fatigue, nothing more. But on Friday night, it happened again. This time, she was on the 8th floor, emptying trash bins in a small accounting office. The room smelled of old coffee and paper, and the desk held a framed photo of a family at Disney World, all of them grinning beneath Mickey Mouse ears. Marjorie found herself staring at it longer than she should, at the father with his arm around his wife, at the way their children pressed close with uncomplicated joy. Frank had wanted to take Claire to Disney World when she was little. They'd saved for it, planned for it, but then the car needed a new transmission, and then there was the medical bill from when Claire broke her arm, and somehow the trip never happened. He'd promised they'd go someday. Someday became never. Marjorie. She spun around, her heart suddenly hammering. The voice had been right behind her, so close she'd felt the breath of it against her neck. The office was empty, but now she could hear something else, a faint humming, tuneless and low. It drifted from somewhere beyond the office door, out in the hallway. A tune she recognized but couldn't quite place, like something half-remembered from a dream. Marjorie stepped into the corridor, her breathing shallow. The overhead lights seemed dimmer than usual, or maybe it was just her eyes adjusting. The humming continued, seeming to come from her left, from the direction of the stairwell. "Who's there?" she called out, trying to sound firm. "This is a secure building. You need to leave." The humming stopped. In its place came a sound that made her blood run cold, a soft, familiar laugh. Gentle, almost affectionate. It sounded exactly like Frank. Marjorie stood frozen in the hallway, her mind racing through possibilities. Someone was playing a trick on her. It had to be. Maybe one of the tenants had stayed late, was hiding somewhere, thought this was funny. Or maybe it was Marcus, though she couldn't imagine why he'd do such a thing. Or maybe she was losing her mind. That thought frightened her more than any intruder. She'd heard stories about grief doing strange things to people, making them see and hear things that weren't there. Was that what this was? Had she finally cracked under the weight of 3 years of loneliness? She walked slowly toward the stairwell door and pressed her ear against it. From beyond came the faint sound of footsteps, deliberate, unhurried, climbing upward. Then they faded into silence. Marjorie's hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. Every instinct told her not to open it, to go back to her cart, to call Marcus and tell him. Tell him what? That she heard ghosts in the stairwell. That her dead husband was humming in the empty building? She opened the door. The stairwell was dark except for the emergency lighting, casting everything in a sickly green glow. Concrete steps stretched upward in switchback patterns, the railing cold metal painted institutional gray. The air smelled of dust and something else, something faint and sweet, like aftershave. Frank's aftershave. Old Spice classic. He'd worn it every day for 30 years, even after they'd stopped making the original formula. He'd found a supplier online who still sold it, ordering bottles by the case. Marjorie had kept one after he died, tucked in the back of her bathroom cabinet, unsure what to do with it but unable to throw it away. The scent was definitely here, impossibly here, hanging in the stairwell like a memory made tangible. "Frank," she whispered, the name feeling strange on her lips after so long. No answer, but from above, from the darkness of the ninth floor, came the creak of a door opening. Marjorie climbed. Her legs felt heavy, disconnected, as if she were moving through water. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering occasionally. Each step echoed in the enclosed space, the sound bouncing back at her from the concrete walls. She passed the 8th floor landing and continued upward, her breath coming faster now, her heart a steady drumbeat in her ears. The 9th floor was darker than the others. Half the lights were out, and the remaining ones cast long shadows across the corridor. This floor had been largely abandoned for years. Most of the offices were empty, their glass doors covered with paper on the inside for privacy that no one needed anymore. At the far end of the hallway, one office door stood ajar. Marjorie approached slowly, every sense heightened. She could hear the building breathing around her, the wheeze of the ventilation, the tick of cooling pipes, the subtle groan of old wood settling. As she drew closer to the open door, she saw a faint light inside, flickering like a candle, though she knew that made no sense. She pushed the door wider. The office was small and bare, empty desk, empty shelves, a single chair pushed into the corner. The walls were painted beige and water-stained near the ceiling, where an old leak had left its mark. The window blinds were drawn, striping the room with shadows. But on the desk sat something that made Marjorie's breath catch. A thermos. Green metal, dented on one side, with a faded sticker that read Frank's Coffee, Touch and Die. It was his. She recognized it instantly. He'd taken it to work every day for 15 years, filled with black coffee so strong it could strip paint. She'd thrown it away after he died, unable to look at it anymore, had put it in a donation box along with his clothes and tools, and all the other objects that had suddenly become unbearable. Yet here it was, sitting on an empty desk in an abandoned office, as if someone had just set it down. Marjorie reached out with a shaking hand and touched it. The metal was warm. "This isn't real," she whispered to the empty room. "This isn't real." But it was. She could feel the dent where he dropped it in the driveway, could see the ghost of his fingerprints on the lid. This was Frank's thermos, impossible as that seemed. From somewhere behind her came the soft sound of breathing. Marjorie spun around, but the doorway was empty. The hallway beyond remained dark and still. Yet she could swear someone was there, just out of sight, watching her. "Frank," her voice cracked on the name. "Is that you? Are you here?" The lights in the hallway flickered once, twice, then steadied. In that brief darkness, Marjorie thought she saw a shadow move, tall, with broad shoulders, standing at the far end of the corridor near the stairwell. When the lights came back on, nothing was there. But now she could hear humming again, that same tuneless melody, and this time she recognized it. Moon River. Frank used to hum it while he worked in the garage, while he did dishes, while he puttered around the house on Sunday mornings. He couldn't carry a tune to save his life, but he hummed it constantly, always slightly off-key. The sound was coming from above her now, from the 10th floor. Marjorie didn't go to the 10th floor that night. Instead, she hurried back to the elevator, rode it down to the lobby, and told Marcus she felt sick, needed to leave early. He looked concerned, offered to call someone, but she waved him off and drove home through empty streets, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. At home, she locked all the doors, checked them twice, and sat in her living room with every light on until the sun came up. The thermos haunted her thoughts. How had it gotten there? Who had put it there? And why? The rational part of her mind insisted there had to be an explanation. Maybe she'd been mistaken. Maybe it was someone else's thermos that just looked similar. Maybe she donated it and someone else had found it, brought it to their office, left it behind when they moved out. But none of those explanations felt right. That dent was too specific. That sticker too familiar. She didn't sleep. When Saturday night came, she almost called in sick to work. Her hand hovered over the phone, ready to dial, to make up some excuse. But she needed the money, needed the insurance, and besides, what would she tell them? That she was afraid of a thermos? That she thought her dead husband was haunting the Hartley building? So she went. Marcus greeted her with his usual nod, but this time he added, "You feeling better, Mrs. Bell?" "Much better, thank you." "Good. Hey, did you lose something on the 9th floor? Someone called the office yesterday, asking if any personal items had been found up there." Marjorie's heart skipped. "Who called?" "Didn't leave a name. Just said they were looking for something they'd left in one of the old offices. I told them we'd check, but that the cleaning crew might have already disposed of anything left behind." "What did this person sound like?" Marcus shrugged. "Older guy. Kind of raspy voice. Didn't stay on the line long." An older guy, with a raspy voice. Frank had developed a rasp in his last few years, from too many cigarettes in his youth, and too much shouting at football games. It had given his voice a rough, gravelly quality that Marjorie had found endearing even when it annoyed her. "If they call back," Marjorie said carefully, "tell them you found a thermos. Tell them they can pick it up during business hours." "Will do." But Marjorie knew no one would call back. Whatever was happening, whoever was behind this, they weren't going to make it that easy. She worked the lower floors methodically, putting off the inevitable. But by 2 a.m., she found herself standing at the elevator, finger hovering over the button for the 9th floor. She had to go back, had to see if the thermos was still there, if it had ever really been there at all. The elevator rose, with agonizing slowness. When the doors opened on the 9th floor, Marjorie stepped into darkness. The hallway lights were completely out now, leaving only the green glow of the exit signs. She pulled out her flashlight and swept it across the corridor. The beam caught dust motes floating in the air, the gleam of doorknobs, the pale rectangles of paper-covered windows. Everything was still, silent. She walked to the office where she'd found the thermos, her footsteps seeming too loud in the quiet. The door was closed now, though she was certain she'd left it open. She turned the handle and pushed inside. The thermos was gone. In its place on the desk lay a photograph. Marjorie picked it up with trembling hands and angled it toward her flashlight. It showed her and Frank on their wedding day, 35 years ago. They were standing on the steps of the courthouse, both of them smiling, Frank's arm around her waist. She remembered that day with perfect clarity, the way the sun had felt on her shoulders, the way Frank had fumbled with the ring, the way he'd kissed her afterward like he'd never let go. She kept this photo in her bedroom, in a frame on her nightstand. It was there when she'd left for work tonight. She was certain of it. "What do you want?" she whispered to the empty office. "What are you trying to tell me?" The temperature dropped suddenly, sharply. Marjorie's breath came out in visible puffs. The flashlight flickered, dimmed, then strengthened again. And in that moment of darkness, she heard it. Marge. That's what he'd called her. Not Marjorie, not Marge, always Marge. Soft and affectionate, the nickname no one else used. "I know you're here," she said, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I can feel you, but I don't understand. Why now? Why here? It's been 3 years, Frank. 3 years." The office door swung shut behind her with a soft click. Marjorie spun around, her heart racing, but there was no one there. Just the closed door and the darkness pressing in around her flashlight beam. She reached for the handle, but before she could turn it, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, measured, coming closer. They stopped right outside the door. Marjorie held her breath, waiting. Through the frosted glass panel in the door, she could see a shadow, the silhouette of someone standing just beyond, tall and broad-shouldered. "Frank," she whispered. The shadow didn't move, didn't respond. It just stood there, waiting. Marjorie's hand shook as she turned the handle and pulled open the door. The hallway was empty, but now she could see something else, a faint trail of water droplets leading down the corridor toward the stairwell, as if someone with wet shoes had walked this way, leaving traces. The droplets caught the green emergency lighting, gleaming like dark jewels against the tile floor. Marjorie followed them. They led to the stairwell door, which stood slightly ajar. Beyond it, she could hear the echo of footsteps climbing upward toward the 10th floor. And beneath that sound, barely audible, came the humming again. Moon River, off-key and achingly familiar. She climbed. The 10th floor was different from the others, where the lower levels housed offices and conference rooms. The 10th was utilitarian, mechanical systems, storage rooms, janitorial closets. The ceiling was lower here, crossed with pipes and ductwork. The air smelled of machine oil and old cardboard. Most of this floor was off-limits, sectioned off behind locked doors that only building management could access. But at the far end of the hallway, past the mechanical room and the storage areas, was a door Marjorie had never paid much attention to before. Room 312. It had been sealed for years. She knew that much. Something about a fire in the 80s, structural damage, asbestos remediation. The building manager had told her never to go in there, that it was dangerous. She'd never had reason to question it. But now the trail of water led directly to that door, and the humming seemed to be coming from behind it. Marjorie approached slowly, her flashlight beam shaking. Up close, she could see that the door wasn't just closed. It was sealed with tape and a printed notice. Condemned. Do not enter, by order of building management. But the seal was broken. The tape hung loose on one side, and when Marjorie touched the door handle, it turned easily in her hand. The door opened with a low creak. Beyond was darkness, so complete her flashlight seemed to barely penetrate it. The air that rushed out was cold and stale, carrying with it that smell again. Old Spice classic, mixed now with something else. Something chemical and wrong. "Frank," Marjorie's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you in there?" No answer, but the humming had stopped, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to press against her ears. She stepped inside. The beam of her flashlight swept across what appeared to be an old office, though it was in severe disrepair. The walls were blackened with soot, the floor covered in debris and water damage. Furniture sat in twisted heaps, a desk overturned, filing cabinets burst open, their contents spilled and moldering. The ceiling sagged dangerously in one corner, and the single window was covered with boards. But what caught Marjorie's attention was the far wall. Written across it in what looked like condensation, letters forming slowly as she watched, were words. "You left me there." Marjorie's blood turned to ice. "What? Left you where?" "Frank, I don't understand." The temperature dropped even further. She could see her breath now, thick white plumes in the flashlight beam. And in the corner of the room, in the darkest shadow where her light didn't quite reach, something moved. A figure, standing, watching. "Frank," her voice cracked. "Is that you?" The figure didn't answer, didn't move closer. It just stood there, a darker darkness in the black, and Marjorie realized with growing horror that she couldn't make out any features. No face, no eyes, just a shape that suggested a man, tall and broad-shouldered, exactly like the accident, she whispered, remembering. "The fire at the warehouse. They said you died instantly. They said you didn't suffer." The figure shifted slightly, and now Marjorie could hear breathing, ragged, labored, the sound of someone who'd inhaled too much smoke. "They told me there was nothing I could have done." she continued, tears streaming down her face now. They said by the time I got the call, you were already gone. I didn't leave you, Frank. I couldn't have saved you. You weren't there. The words appeared on the wall again, forming letter by letter in the condensation. I know I wasn't there. I was at home. I was making dinner, and you were at work, and then the phone rang, and... Her voice broke into sobs. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have said goodbye. I should have told you I loved you one more time that morning, instead of being angry about the stupid dishes in the sink. The figure moved closer, and Marjorie could see it more clearly now. It was tall, yes, and built like Frank. But there was something wrong about it, something not quite right. The proportions were slightly off, the movement too smooth, too fluid. And when it spoke, the voice was Frank's, but also wasn't, like a recording played at the wrong speed. Familiar words in an unfamiliar tone. Marge. She backed toward the door, her heart hammering. You're not him. You're not Frank. Still here, Marge. No, Frank is gone. He died 3 years ago. He was cremated. I scattered his ashes at the lake, where we used to fish. You're not him. The figure tilted its head, and in that moment, Marjorie saw something that made her scream. Where its face should have been was nothing but shadow. But in that shadow were 2 points of light, like eyes catching her flashlight beam. Eyes that weren't human. She ran. Out of room 312, down the hallway, her flashlight beam bouncing wildly as she sprinted for the stairwell. Behind her, she could hear footsteps, not running, but walking with that same measured pace, unhurried and inevitable. And beneath it, that humming again. Moon River in Frank's off-key voice, growing louder. Marjorie burst through the stairwell door and took the stairs 2 at a time, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had to get out, had to get to the lobby, to Marcus, to anywhere with lights and people and normalcy. She made it to the 9th floor landing when her foot slipped on something wet. Those same water droplets, though she hadn't noticed them on her way up. She grabbed the railing to steady herself and looked down. The droplets weren't water. They were dark, viscous. In the dim light of the stairwell, they looked almost black, but Marjorie knew what they were. Blood. A trail of blood leading down the stairs, fresh enough to still be wet. No, she whispered. No. She continued down, faster now, nearly falling in her panic. The blood trail followed her, appearing on each landing as if someone was walking just ahead, leaving these terrible breadcrumbs. And the humming followed too, echoing in the concrete shaft of the stairwell, coming from above and below simultaneously. On the 7th floor landing, she had to stop. Her chest hurt, her legs were shaking, and she couldn't breathe properly. She leaned against the wall, trying to calm down, trying to think. This couldn't be real. None of this could be real. She was having some kind of breakdown, a psychotic episode brought on by grief and isolation. The thermos, the photo, the voice, all of it was in her head. It had to be. But the blood on the stairs was real. She could smell it now. That copper tang that made her stomach turn. The stairwell door on the 7th floor opened. Marjorie looked up to see the figure standing there, silhouetted in the doorway. It was fully formed now, no longer just a shadow, but something more solid. And it looked exactly like Frank, same height, same build, same clothes he'd worn to work that last day. Jeans, blue work shirt, steel-toed boots. Except its face was wrong, burned, blackened, the skin cracked and weeping, the eyes milky white. You left me there, it said, and its voice was Frank's voice but ruined, crackling like a dying fire. I called for you. I was burning and I called and you didn't come. That's not true. Marjorie screamed. You were already dead. They said you died instantly. The thing that looked like Frank took a step toward her. Still burning, Marge. Still here. Can't you smell it? And she could. Beneath the Old Spice and the blood was another smell. Smoke and burning meat and melted plastic. The smell of the warehouse fire that had killed her husband 3 years ago. You're not him. Marjorie sobbed. Whatever you are, you're not Frank. He would never hurt me. He would never make me feel like this. The figure paused. For a moment, something passed across its ruined face. Confusion, maybe, or sadness. Hurting, it said. So much hurting. Needed you. Still need you. I can't help you. I don't know how to help you. Come with me, it said, reaching out a blackened hand. Don't leave me alone again. So alone, Marge. So cold and alone. Marjorie pressed herself against the wall, as far from that reaching hand as she could get. No. I'm sorry, Frank. I'm so sorry for everything. But I can't go with you. I can't. The figure's face contorted, and for just a moment, Marjorie saw her real husband beneath the burns, his gentle eyes, his crooked smile, the face she'd loved for 35 years. Please, it whispered. Please, Marge. Then the moment passed, and the face became something else entirely. Something hungry. Something that wore Frank's shape but held nothing of Frank's soul. It lunged. Marjorie threw herself down the next flight of stairs, lost her footing completely, and tumbled. Pain exploded in her shoulder, her hip, her head as she rolled and bounced off concrete steps. She came to rest on the 6th-floor landing, dazed and bleeding, her flashlight shattered somewhere above. In the darkness, she could hear it coming down the stairs, not rushing, just walking, step by step, taking its time. She crawled toward the 6th-floor door, every movement agony. Her right arm wasn't working properly, and something warm was running down her face, blood from a cut on her forehead. She reached the door, grabbed the handle, and pulled herself up. The door was locked. No, she moaned, pulling uselessly at the handle. No, no, please. The footsteps grew closer. She could see it now in the dim emergency lighting, that shambling figure, wearing Frank's face like a mask, descending toward her with mechanical precision. Still here, it said. Always here. Never leaving again. Marjorie closed her eyes. She thought of Claire, of her grandchildren she hadn't seen in months, of the garden she'd never plant in the spring, of all the mornings she wouldn't wake up to see. She thought of Frank, the real Frank, not this thing, and wondered if she'd see him soon, if death would reunite them, or if she'd simply cease to exist. A hand touched her shoulder, but it wasn't the burned hand of the thing on the stairs. It was warm, human, and when a voice spoke, it was Marcus's voice, real and solid and blessedly normal. Mrs. Bell? Jesus, what happened? Marjorie opened her eyes to see the young security guard standing over her, his face creased with concern. Beyond him, the stairwell was empty. No figure, no blood, no humming, just concrete and shadows and blessed, empty silence. I fell, she managed to say. I thought I heard something up on the 10th floor. Went to investigate. Lost my footing. We need to get you to a hospital. Can you walk? With Marcus's help, Marjorie made it down to the lobby and into the ambulance when it arrived 10 minutes later. The paramedics fussed over her injuries. Minor concussion, bruised ribs, sprained wrist. Lucky, they said. Could have been much worse. Marcus insisted on following the ambulance to the hospital. Wanted to make sure she was okay. Such a nice young man. So concerned. He kept apologizing, saying he should have been doing his rounds, should have checked on her. Not your fault, Marjorie told him. My own foolishness. But as the ambulance pulled away from the Hartley building, she looked back at it through the rear window. Up on the 10th floor, in one of the dark windows, she thought she saw a figure standing, watching, and even through the closed ambulance doors, even over the sound of the siren, she could swear she heard it, humming. Marjorie spent 2 days in the hospital. Observation, they called it, making sure the concussion hadn't caused any serious damage, that there was no internal bleeding. Claire flew in from Portland, beside herself with worry, talking about moving Marjorie out west, whether she liked it or not. But Marjorie wasn't thinking about Portland or gardens or the future. She was thinking about room 312. about condensation forming words on a blackened wall, about a thermos that shouldn't exist and a photograph that should have been on her nightstand, about what grief could do to a person, about how loneliness could create monsters from memory. On the third day, Marcus visited. He brought flowers and apologies, still feeling responsible for her accident. Marjorie assured him it wasn't his fault, but she had questions. "Marcus, what can you tell me about room 312? On the 10th floor." The young man's expression shifted. "Room 312? There's no room 312, Mrs. Bell." "What? The 10th floor only goes up to 310. There's number 312. Never has been, according to the building plans." Marjorie felt the world tilt. "But I saw it. The door was right there at the end of the hallway." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Bell, when I found you, you were on the 6th floor landing, not anywhere near the 10th floor. Are you sure you didn't imagine?" "I know what I saw." "But did she?" The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. The details were slipping away like water through her fingers. What had she actually seen versus what she'd feared she'd seen? After Marcus left, Marjorie lay in her hospital bed and tried to piece together the truth. But truth felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. The world she'd understood, solid, predictable, governed by rational laws, had cracked open to reveal something beneath. Something that hummed off-key and smelled of Old Spice, and asked why she'd left it alone. Claire took her home on the 4th day. Stayed for a week, making sure Marjorie was settled. She'd already put the house on the market, had found a nice assisted living facility in Portland with a waiting list they could get on. All very practical. All very sensible. Marjorie agreed to everything. What else could she do? But at night alone,